day, ma'am. I am Lyra Abay-abay from BSed Filipino. So, karon ang topic nako is about information processing theory. So, kani makita na to is si George Armitage Miller or George A. Miller. So, he was an American psychologist who was one of the founders of cognitive psychology and more broadly of cognitive science. So, George Miller, he developed the information processing theory or IPT. So IPT is all about how our minds work when we learn new things. It's like studying what happens inside your head when you get a new piece of information. So IPT, imagine your mind is like a computer. When you see something or hear something, a stimulus, or your mind takes that information and process it, store it away, and then use it to respond. So, ingani ni nga, think of it like the steps. Ingani nga step. First step is receive. So, you see, you hear something new. Mao na ag kanang atong gamit ang stimulus to hear or to taste, maka-learn tag something new, maka-receive tag new information. Then is second step is process. Your brain is figure out what it means and how it fits with what you already know. So, third step is store. You save this information in your memory. So, kanang information na imo nang i-save na sa imong memory, then mo proceed na ka sa next step, which is ang retrieve. So, when you need it later, ang kanang information, you pull it back out of your memory. Mo na ang ikaupat nga step na retrieve. And ang kailang mga step is response. You use that information to do something or say something mo nang maka-respond na ka. Mo nang ang step sa IPT or information processing theory. Learning is basically changing or updating the information stored in your memory. So, the more you learn, the more information your mind has worked with. So, understanding how people learn is really important because there's a specific way our brains work when we learn something new. So, a long time ago, a guy named Miller figured out that our short-term memory is like a temporary holding space of information for information. So it can only hold a certain amount of stuff at once. So he said that we can only remember at about 5 to 9 things that make sense to us. So he called this idea chunking. So it means that we group information together to make easier to remember. So for example, instead of trying to remember 10 separate numbers, we might chunk them into two groups of 5. That makes easier for our brains to handle the information. The information processing theory model has three major components, namely sensory memory, short-term memory, and long-term memory. So, sensory memory, imagine your brain is like a super fast camera that take pictures of everything you see, hear, smell, taste, and touch. This is called sensory memory. And it only holds this picture for a few seconds. So, It's like when you are at a basketball game, you might see the player with the ball, but you also see the other players and the crowd. So, your sensory memory captures all of it, but it only keeps it for a short time. Then, your brain decides what's important to focus on, and this is called selective attention. You might choose to focus on the player with the ball because you want to see what they do next. So, naa siya'y selective attention gihapon. So, before we proceed to the next components, there are few things that influence what you choose to focus on. First is how important it is to you. You if you really want to learn something, you pay more attention to it. Second is how similar it is to other things. If something if there is something very different from what you're used to, you might pay attention to it. And third is how hard it is. If something is really difficult, you might have to focus more and understand it. And last, how good you are at focusing. So some people are better at concentrating on other things than others. So if you don't pay attention on something your brain forgets after few seconds. But if you do pay attention, your brain sends that information to your short-term memory, which is like a temporary storage space of information. So let's proceed to the second IPT model. Second components of IPT. So let's proceed to the second IPT components. So the second IPT components is a short-term memory. Think of your short-term memory is like a temporary notepad. It holds information for a short time, about 5 to 20 seconds. While you decide what to do with it, it's like a tiny space that can only hold a few things at once. Maybe 5 to 9 pieces of information. So before you can save information in your long-term memory, which is like a big hard drive, you need to do things. So there are two strategies. First is maintenance or rehearsal. This is like repeating the information over and over again, like when you sing the ABC or ABC song or count it 1 to 10, i-repeat yun nimo. Need nimo og rehearsal. The next second strategy is elaborative rehearsal or encoding. So this like connecting the new information to the things you already know to para it makes the information more meaningful and easier to remember. So here are some ways to encode information. First is organize. So group information together like putting numbers into chunk. Mo tong giingon ako ganiha nga chunk nga idea ni uh, George Miller nga imong i-group ag information into chunk. The next is create hierarchies or put information into categories like some like sorting plants and animals into different groups like kini siya animals siya kini siya things siya then mao na um, diring sa kuan nga mag-create kag hierarchies nga by steps or ingana like in ikatulo is ang use of mnemonics. So there are tricks to help you to remember things like Logibib, mo na ag kuan sa mnemonics. for the colors of rainbow, mao na retrieve mo mao na kanang example of use of mnemonics. Next is the use imagery. So create a picture in your mind of the information, like picturing example is a payaw on a map ing ana. So if you don't rehearse or encode information, it's like forgetting to save a file in your computer. It disappeared from your short-term memory and you forget it. So let's proceed to the third components of IPT model, which is the long-term memory. So think of it that the long-term memory as a giant library with endless shelves. It's where you store all the information you learn and experience, and in it can hold everything. So there are different types of information stored in your long-term memory. First is the semantic memory. This is like the encyclopedia section of your library. It holds all the facts and concepts and knowledge that you learn even if you didn't experience them in yourself. So, bisan dili nimo na experience. So, for example, ana is knowing the capital of France. So, dili wa nimo siya na experience but kay baw ka ana na stored na sa imong phone. Or the names of the planets. So, mao na ang mga semantic examples sa semantic memory. Then, second is episodic memory. So, episodic memory is like your personal diary. It holds all the information of events in your life, like your birthday party or your first day of school. Ingana, you can remember who was there when it happened and what you did. So, mao na ang example sa episodic memory. Next is the procedural memory. This like your how to or manual. It holds all the skills and knowledge you have about doing things like riding a bike or tying your shoes. Mo na kanang some example or basic example of procedural memory. The next is the imagery memory. Imagery memory. This like your picture album. It holds all the mental images you have, like what giraffe looks like, or what your favorite food tastes like, or you can use these images to help you remember things. Mao na ang ibig sabihin sa imagery memory. So, mao na tutana na ang different types of information stored in your long-term memory. So, first ato is ang semantic memory, episodic memory, procedural memory, and lastly, the imagery memory. Your long-term memory is like a huge organized collection of all the information you learn and experience. So, retrieving information from your long-term memory is hard. So, how can you do it? So, imagine your long-term memory is like a huge library. You have all this information stored there, but sometimes it's hard to find what you need. So, unsa ray imong need nga i-response or ipagawas, or so usahay makalimot ta, usahay natay dili makuha nga information sa tong long-term memory. So, need na to retrieving of information from our long-term memory. So, it's like going to the library and finding specific book. So, you need to locate the information and bring it back to your short-term memory so you can use it. Studies shown that we don't remember everything we store in our long-term memory. So, how will we remember something depends on how we learn in the first place. So, there are two main ways to retrieve information from your long-term memory. So first is recalling. This is trying to remember something without any help. It's like trying to remember the name of the book you read without looking at the cover. So under sa recalling, na ay free recall, or you trying to remember something on your own nga walay hints. Then ang second ana is cue recall, or you get some clues or hints na kay mga hints to help you remember. Or for example ana is you trying to remember a letter in the alphabet na you might see mga picture of an object that starts with that letter. The next second is the recognizing. So this is like choosing the right answer from the list or option. It's like kanang sa mga multiple tests. You might not remember the exact answer, but ma-recognize nimo siya o makita nimo siya. Mao na ang recognizing. Lastly, in retrieving, there are also something called the primacy and recency effect. This means that we tend to remember things that happen at the beginning or at the end of the experience better than things that happen in the middle. The primacy and recency effect, this means that kanang maka-remember ta sa what happened in the beginning and what happened at the end. Retrieving information from your long-term memory is like finding books in the library. It takes some effort, but with the right strategies, you can find what you need. So the next topic or next information about IPT, or the IPT or the information processing theory is is i-discuss sa akong kagrupo. So thank you for listening, mom, and have a good day. God bless.